A little bit before we can get back to the costing of this education, because there are proposals on how CBC will be assessed in school. For instance, grade 6, which is the transition to junior school, there will be a cumulative score of what a student has been getting from the school-based assessments from grade 4 to grade 6. And the essence of this assessment will be to monitor learners' progress and give feedback to the various stakeholders that are involved in that sector. Then for those that will be in grade 9, that is junior school, you're transitioning now to the senior school, 20% will come from the Kenya Primary School Education Assessment. This is an assessment that was actually administered last year for grade 6 learners. 20% will come from the school-based assessment, which is for grade 7 and 8, and then 60% to be a summative evaluation. We'll be getting to understand what this summative evaluation is, and of course this is supposed to be guided by the Kenya National Examinations Council. Then for grade 12, which is the senior secondary, you're now transitioning to the university level, 70% to be summative assessment. 30% to be school-based assessment, meaning inclusive of an assessment of the community service learning and an assessment of the values and competencies that you'll have acquired while in the line of schooling. Dr. Mugo, when you look at this, knowing that you've done a lot of research in as far as how competent learners are, and especially those studies that you used to do and said that a grade 7 or standard 7 learner cannot answer some standard 2 question, this changing how we're assessing the learners, how will it exactly work, and what must we do to ensure that it works, so that you're not just appreciating the competencies in about responding to academic questions, but also everything else that CBC is supposed to be achieving?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, assessment is going to be a key driver of the success of CBC. And from this frame of examination, of scores, of getting an A and all that, we have to shift from that to what is the student able to do. When you give them something to read, you know what is their level. And so that is going to necessitate a new generation of teachers. And the first thing to do is to ensure that those teachers who are under training now in pre-service are being trained in a new way of assessing, not examining, because we have shifted now from examining to assessing. And those teachers that are in classroom today are equipped well and through ongoing support in the classroom on how to make this very critical shift from examining to assessing. But the other one has been the question of trust. And you wonder why primary school teachers cannot be trusted to give scores to their pupils. Secondary school teachers cannot be trusted. But when you go to TVET, you go to university, you find that where a professor here teaches, he assesses his students and submits marks. So I think this shift also the public face has to move. But if this is not supported by values, I think teachers have to agree that we have the responsibility of being trusted, of demonstrating the values that we want to see in society. Because if you're a teacher and you are guiding your pupils and students to steal an examination, then you are not supposed to be a teacher in the first place. So support by values is also critical, but the most critical is assessment capacities, because assessing things we see in CBC like problem solving, like values like respect or responsibility, is not the same as examining biology or chemistry. It's a total shift. And these things are not a black and white, right and wrong. It is actually a journey that the student has been on, and you have to place them somewhere. So we have not seen these capacities being developed adequately in the system, and it's a big concern. But there are other things also we have had, like community service learning, parental engagement and empowerment. How are we going also to assess these other things, principles, so that we know that the system is moving in the direction? So it is not just assessing the students, right. It is also assessing the system and us holding the system to account.
Na bila shaka, Daktari Manyasa, kuna hili swala lingine ambalo limependekezwa kuhusiana na jinsi ambavyo shule zinaweka kwenye viwango. Tumezoea kwamba kuna zile shule za kitaifa, kuna zile za extra county na mambo kama hayo, lakini sasa zinapaswa kulingana na mapendekezo haya kuwekwa katika labda tuseme zile taaluma za kisayansi au za mambo mengine. Je, hili swala litawezekana ukiangazia hususan masuala ya miundo msingi na hata walimu ambao wanahitajika katika shule hizi ambazo zitakuwa zinawekwa kwenye viwango namna hii?
Asante Mashirima, and since I believe maybe this is the last time I'm commenting, allow me to make comments beyond the question that you asked, but I'll answer your question as well. The first thing I want to speak to is the notion that has been sold during this show that the new capitation model will actually solve the problems universities are facing. The problems universities are facing stem from, one, government failure to send capitation on time, and two, from mismanagement by the VCs who are there. I taught in the university and I saw mismanagement from a close range. They acquired campuses, most of which made losses. They have closed them down. They lost money that they should not have lost. The third thing that causes all this is, and this is the problem around the notion that this model will solve the problem, is that if government fails to remit the money is committing to give us scholarships for those who need, the universities will still not have money. So that will still be a problem. So I think that we need to put that to rest. The reason some of us campaigned for a differentiated model was for equity, not for solving university management problems, because that won't be solved by the change of the model. The second thing that I want to mention is what I've seen in the report that is not very good, in the sense that there are recommendations which seem to contradict each other along the way. One of the things that I can speak to here is the recommendation to remove the National Education Board. So we want to remove the National Education Board and leave the county education boards, which, if you look at their functions, they are supposed to work in consultation and cooperation with the National Education Board. I don't understand that. The second thing is the suggestion that the county commissioners should chair the county education boards. And if you look at the functions that the county education board is supposed to deal with, one of them is to oversee ECD and vocational training, which are devolved functions. If you give a county commissioner, are you nationalizing those functions? If you give the county commissioner to chair the county education board, I think that is a problem. Finally, I think, if you look at the problem we've seen in the news feature, and you imagine that some of those schools are hosting junior secondary right now, because we decided that we'll keep junior secondary in primary. So some of those schools are hosting junior secondary. What are they preparing those young people for? Are they capable of preparing anyone for senior school? I have seen the recommendation that will make sub-county schools to be senior schools. I have photos of some of the sub-county schools that look exactly like what we've seen here. Are they capable, even if someone gave us 100 billion today to invest in them with 2 years, and the way we know government inertia, will we be able to transform those sub-county schools in 2 years to make them worthy of senior school? So very, very pertinently, I think, it is important that we put our minds together and start to agree that we shall no longer use education as this private good that we fight for and we use to create advantages and disadvantages among our children.
Yet it is supposed to be a public good. I think, Professor Dotto, you owe your right of reply because you sat in the Presidential Working Party. But first of all, those questions about the funding, the infrastructure that we are seeing, but also proposal that 60% of the institutions, currently secondary schools, should be STEM. How do you do that at a time that majority of teachers are actually not in the science areas? You don't have sufficient infrastructure in terms of what a science school needs. How do we get there?
Thanks. You know, it's very easy to speak about the problems, and Dr. Munyasa has done a very good job speaking about the problems. Our responsibility was to provide solutions, and I will try and respond in terms of providing solutions. Let's start with the concerns about the dilapidated nature of schools. That is not a preserve of the primary schools. It is a preserve of almost all our schools across the country. If you go to primary schools, you'll see the same problem. If you go to what you are calling sub-county schools, secondary schools currently, They are the same kind of problem. Yet, those schools have been delivering people. I think as we make the suggestions that we made, we need to look at the two sides of the equation that we're trying to deal with. For resource allocation, what have we proposed? We have, for example, made the proposals about minimum essential package to ensure that every school has a minimum levels of infrastructure support. Secondly, we've spoken about the need to ensure that schools have technology. We've spoken about the need for there to be able to ensure that we build additional classrooms and laboratories for all the schools. The idea about dealing with equity that Dr. Munyasa speaks about for the universities, but not for the primary level, is that if we want to make education affordable, then the schools that are near my home must be as good as the schools that are far from me. That's the only way we'll ensure that Collins Odote does not have to go to Starehe for him to succeed. Because if he only must go to Starehe and Alliance, then we'll continue making education the preserve of the rich. It is the reason why, even in terms of funding, we have said much more resources. We need to reverse what's been the current practice. The current practice is the bulk of the resources have gone to national schools. We are making the point that the bulk of the resources must be reversed. They must go to sub-county schools because 70% of kids actually learn in those sub-county schools. That's the first thing. The second thing, in terms of how will teachers be able to deliver on this? That's why retooling is important, so that everybody is taught to learn the new things. Lastly, about assessment that you spoke about. I think the one thing that we've done, and thank you, Dr. Mugo, the one thing that we've done about assessment, you know, the fact that now assessment as grade 6 is not for placement. You saw kids finish grade 6, and the hula baloo that comes after those exams, I am looking for a school, what will happen, was essentially away. But there's a second thing that we haven't spoken about, that those assessments are not lost. That the assessment that you have in grade 6 will eventually impact on what happens in grade 9. They'll eventually impact on what happens in grade 12. Because at the end of the day, we want to move to a system where when I was in school, Sam, I did very well in Kiswahili.
Right.
After that, I went to a school and I was looking for a teaching job. They offered me to teach Kiswahili. I told them, although I passed Kiswahili, I cannot teach Kiswahili.
You can teach Kiswahili.
I think we need to reach a stage where people are looking for their competences, not the academic grades that you got. And that's what the change of assessment is trying to do.
So the summative assessment is written exam?
The summative assessment at the end, yes, it is.
Okay, all right. We want to transition. Dr. Kilemi, allow me to transition first to Kibra.